Welcome to Daily Joy, where every movie is a story waiting to be relived. Today's movie name is The Mechanic Resurrection. Be aware that this video contains spoilers, so proceed with caution. Former hitman Arthur, who faked his death, enjoying a quiet life in Rio de Janeiro under a fake name. One afternoon, while Arthur is enjoying himself at a wonderful restaurant, Renee approaches him and reveals his true identity. She serves a powerful man who wants Arthur to kill 3 opponents while making it appear as an accident. If Arthur rejects the offer, her boss will tell criminals that he is still alive. Arthur pretends to need to make a phone call and takes out his phone, but in reality he uses it to picture Renee. She swiftly grabs her revolver, and Arthur responds by pressing the table against her, refusing the offer. All of Renee's thugs approach Arthur, who fights them with his self-defense skills and any object he can find in a restaurant, even the grill. Then Arthur jumps onto the roof of a passing sky tram to flee, but Renee and her men board the same train and try to shoot Arthur from inside. Renee also attempts to climb up to him, forcing Arthur to flee by jumping onto the back of a hand glider. In the evening, Arthur goes to his boat and discovers some suspicious persons on board. Using a remote control, he ignites the bombs he had prepared in case of an emergency, causing the boat to explode and kill those guys. Afterward, he goes to an old container where he stored all of his gear and destroys his old passport in order to create a fresh identity. Later, Arthur moves to Thailand, where his old friend May gives him back his old property. Arthur has hidden extra weapons and tools under the cabin floor, so he quickly begins investigating Renee. He understands she works with Crane, a violent criminal he knows well. The next day, a woman named Gina visits May's residence to get some healthcare supplies. May notices multiple bruises on her, but Gina rejects any extra care. When night falls, May hears screams from one of the boats and sees Gina being brutally abused by a man named Frank. May asks Arthur for help. Even though he doesn't want to go, he knows he owes it to her. When Arthur arrives at the boat, he attempts to ask for Gina respectfully, but Frank attacks him. Arthur immediately defends himself, and when Frank falls, he accidentally hits his skull and dies. When Gina sees the dead bodies, she collapses, and May approaches the boat to bring her to the beach. Meanwhile, Arthur looks around and finds a handgun, Gina's passport, and a phone with his photo. Then Arthur sets the boat on fire. When Arthur enters the cottage, he wakes up Gina and asks if she works with Crane, waving a pistol at her. Gina tries to disarm Arthur, but he easily takes over her and forces her to speak. Crane did send Gina, but she does not work for him, and he manipulates her into doing this. She was supposed to play an innocent victim to get Arthur's attention, but Frank overreacted his part. The plan was to approach Arthur and then call Crane, but Arthur prevents her from doing so. He will decide when these guys arrive. The next day, Arthur discovers Gina was a member of a humanitarian organization that gave aid in Cambodia. Arthur asks Gina what Crane has on her, and Gina explains that she operates a shelter for victims of human trafficking. A few weeks ago, a staff member went missing, and her body was found 2 days later at her door. Crane sent an assassin who threatened to kill the children if Gina refused to complete this mission for him. Later, Arthur notices a boat nearby, with people staring at the beach. They were most likely sent by Crane, so Arthur walks around with Gina holding his hand, giving the impression that her mission is succeeding. May senses this and brings them together at a party she is giving, where Arthur and Gina have an amazing time. In the evening, Gina apologizes to Arthur for putting him in this position. Arthur explains that he understands because he was previously orphaned. He was sold to a gangster who taught young warriors, and Crane was there as well. Arthur ran away, but Crane did not, and Arthur feels they blamed Crane for it, so he seeks revenge. Then Gina and Arthur kiss and spend the night together. Following that, Arthur promises Gina that he has made every effort of helping her escape while avoiding hurting the children. He will not carry out the murders that Crane asks. Instead, he will kill Crane. Arthur also gives Gina his father's watch, his only recollection of him. The next morning, a number of police officers arrive at the beach, but Gina recognizes one of them as Crane's man. Arthur begins fighting them off, but while he is distracted, the guys kidnap Gina, forcing Arthur to accept a meeting with Crane. Crane then reminds Arthur that if he wants Gina back, he needs to carry out 3 killings for him while making them look accidental. The first is Krill, Africa's most well-known guns dealer who is currently imprisoned in Malaysia. Crane also offers him a drug to take after the murder so that they can find him. While Arthur performs, Gina hides in one of Crane's various boats. Arthur travels to Malaysia and begins studying the prison, which is built on top of cliffs and surrounded by shark-infested waters, making it impossible to sneak in. With a plan in mind, Arthur buys some powerful explosives disguised as chewing tobacco, shark repellent in a skincare box, and a capsule placed within a cigarette. Finally, he makes a fake ID and disguises himself as a famous wanted felon. As soon as Arthur begins walking through Malaysian streets, he is recognized and arrested. In prison, the receptionist finds nothing strange about his items and allows them to be kept. Arthur takes it easy for the first 3 days, talking with other criminals to learn more about his objective. Many people want to kill Krill, so he always has his warriors with him. Even though he is imprisoned, Krill runs all of his businesses from here and is the genuine ruler of the town. Arthur witnesses 2 inmates trading blades, and after lunch, he purposefully crashes into them to grab their knife. Later, one of Krill's former men tries to kill him for revenge, but Arthur steps in and kills him with a knife. Krill is impressed and invites Arthur to dinner, but Arthur only accepts if Krill promises to leave his men outside. Surprisingly, Krill agrees to his terms, and Arthur is escorted from his cell to Krill's tent in the evening. Krill tries to offer Arthur a job, but as soon as he turns around, Arthur strikes and kills him by putting pressure on his neck. Then he mixes the snake poison Krill uses in his rituals with his own drink to make it appear that Krill executed himself. The guards outside are becoming suspicious, so Arthur places the body in a praying position, making them to believe the silence is due to religious reasons. Following that, Arthur uses explosive gum to make a hole in a jail wall. Then he takes the medication, covers himself in shark repellent, and jumps into the ocean before the cops can catch him. Crane's men are waiting for him on a fishing boat, and Arthur escapes safely. Crane arranges a video call to ensure Gina's safety before assigning Arthur his second target, Adrian Cook, an Australian human trafficker. A few days later, Arthur is pursuing his goal. He discovers that Cook's rooftop suite is impenetrable, but he also has a panoramic pool that stretches above the streets. Arthur rents a helicopter to study the plan from a distance before claiming to be interested in one of the apartments near Cook's. While the agent shows him around, Arthur calls her phone to distract her and photographs the apartment keys so that he can duplicate them. Finally, he uses dangerous chemicals to create a small but strong explosive capable of breaking glass and causing it to look like it was cracked under pressure. A few days later, Arthur disguises himself as a technician to enter the building undetected, and then uses the duplicate key to gain access to his apartment. Arthur escapes through the window and climbs the building until he reaches the pool, where he digs a small hole to place his special explosive. Cook is currently swimming and can see Arthur, but before he can tell the guards, the glass smashes. Arthur jumps away and slips down the building to his flat as the swimming pool falls, killing Cook. Crane sees Cook's death on the news and instructs his men to prepare for the next video call. Gina notices that they have her sit near a window that displays the boat's hull number, so she adjusts the camera to include the window in the image. When the call begins, Gina extends her hand to show Arthur the watch, hoping to get him to look at the number. As soon as the thug finds out, he hangs up the call, but Arthur gets the number and uses it to find the boat. Later, Arthur instructs a helicopter to follow Crane's boat, then jumps into the ocean with a suitcase full of special equipment. After placing the bag under the boat, Arthur sneaks aboard and begins murdering everyone he meets. Unfortunately, he is discovered, and Arthur is forced to fight a gang of thugs as Gina is taken away. She tries to defend herself, but her basic skills are insufficient, so she is placed in a helicopter. Unfortunately, other men approach and stun Arthur in an attempt to capture him. Gina and Arthur are then taken to another boat, where Crane admits he knew Arthur would do this since he couldn't help himself, but he must still carry out the third execution. After Crane leaves, Arthur knocks up the guards rather than allowing them to properly expel him. Then he rushes into the water and grabs his equipment, which includes an oxygen tank and a small engine to help him escape safely. A few days later, Arthur travels in Bulgaria, where he discovers the final victim, Max Adams, an American weapons salesman. Arthur begins his research and discovers that Adams has a maximum security stronghold where he keeps submarines equipped with intercontinental ballistic missiles. He also realizes that these assassinations are Crane's attempt to destroy all of his competitors in the armaments trade, which gives him second thoughts. Later, Arthur shoots one of Adams' guards from a long distance before climbing onto a hospital roof and sheltering in an emergency helicopter. The pilot flies to Adams' fortress to check on the fallen soldier, and while everyone is distracted, Arthur enters. Inside, He installs a jammer to deactivate the security cameras before taking down any guards he encounters. The building is soon put on alert, and the gang members take Adams to his panic room. However, Arthur causes the elevator to malfunction, delaying their arrival. When Adams enters his room, Arthur is already there to greet him. Arthur, on the other hand, does not shoot. Instead, he proposes an alliance to bring Crane down. Arthur's method begins with Adams faking his own death. Later, Adams is checking his submarines when a bomb goes off as he crosses a bridge. Arthur gets ready to go underwater and shares an oxygen tank with Adams to get him to the beach. Crane observes the explosion on television, where the news reveals that Adams' body has been buried in the water beneath an enormous amount of fragments. At this point, Arthur calls to notify him about the third assassination, but Crane refuses to believe him until he sees the body. Arthur assures that the body may be found underwater, so after hanging up, Crane sends his men to find Adams' body and kill Arthur. Meanwhile, Arthur returns to the submarine pen and sets up several traps ahead of time. When Crane's henchmen arrive, one by one they fall into the traps and die, while those who do not are killed by Arthur in the shadows. Crane believes Arthur is coming for him next and sets Gina outdoors as bait. Arthur goes underwater and arrives, reaches the boat, where he immediately starts killing every guard in sight. Crane sees him on the surveillance film and orders his men to bring Gina back inside, just as Arthur turns off the cameras. Gina fights the guard who has seized her, bruising her stomach, before being pushed into the jacuzzi, where Crane snatches her next. While Arthur fights the soldiers, Crane takes Gina inside and detonates a device hidden within the boat. Then he flees in his rescue boat. Just a second later, Arthur finds Gina and learns about the explosives, so he puts her in an emergency release pod and sends her away. Following that, Arthur pursues Crane, murdering the final few guards before engaging in a hand-to-hand fight. Crane grabs the anchor chain and attempts to seize Arthur's leg, but Arthur uses its length to bind Crane to the boat. Crane chuckles because Arthur delayed too long and would die, but Arthur appears unconcerned and rushes inside just before the bomb goes off. Gina regrets Arthur's death as she watches the yacht explode and catch fire. At least the explosion exposed their location, and she was rescued by the Coast Guard. Adams also sees from the shore and suspects there is something weird about the boat parts being brought in from the sea. He also notices a surveillance camera nearby. Gina returns to Cambodia with the children a few weeks later and writes to May to express her gratitude for the water filter donation. One afternoon, while teaching, she is startled to discover that Arthur is still alive and has come to see her. Meanwhile, Adams analyzes Crane's boat and discovers that his design includes a diving bell, which reserves trapped air and allows divers to breathe underwater. Adams checks the security footage and discovers that Arthur escaped by hiding in the diving bell.
Hey everyone, thanks so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to hit that like, share and subscribe button to my channel to see more videos like this.